If you had told me a month ago that I'd be standing in my own kitchen, watching my daughter and her husband rifle through my personal documents while my wife sat alone upstairs, I would have laughed. But there I was, home 3 hours early from my fishing trip, and the scene before me made my blood run cold. Let me back up. My name is Thomas Brennan. I'm 68 years old, a retired civil engineer from Sacramento, California. My wife Margaret and I built our life together over 43 years of marriage. We raised our daughter Emily in the same house we still live in today, a modest 3-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood with oak trees lining the streets. Nothing fancy, but it's ours, paid off, our sanctuary. Emily, our only child, is 42 now. She married Richard Crawford 5 years ago. I'll be honest, I never warmed to the man. Something about the way he smiled too easily, talked too smoothly. Margaret said I was being overprotective, that no man would ever be good enough for my little girl. Maybe she was right. I tried to give him a chance. That Wednesday morning, I left at dawn for a fishing trip to Lake Tahoe with my old college buddy Frank. Margaret kissed me goodbye, told me to catch something big. She seemed tired, I noticed, but she insisted she was fine, just hadn't slept well. I made her promise to rest while I was gone. The drive to Tahoe takes about 2 hours, but I forgot my tackle box. Realized it when I was only 20 minutes down the road. Frank said we could buy what we needed up there, but I'm stubborn about my gear. That tackle box was a gift from my father, and I wasn't about to replace the lures inside. So I turned around. I didn't call ahead. Why would I? It was my house. When I pulled into the driveway at 8:30, I noticed Emily's white SUV parked out front. That was odd. She lived in Roseville, a 40-minute drive, and she'd never been an early morning person. Richard's black BMW sat next to it. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside quietly, setting my keys down on the entry table. That's when I heard them. Richard's voice carried from my home office down the hall. I need that deed, Emily. Stop being emotional about this. They're your parents. They'll understand. They're old. They don't need a house this big. My daughter's voice, quieter, uncertain. I don't know, Richard. This feels wrong. Maybe we should just file for bankruptcy. Start over. Bankruptcy? Richard's laugh was cold. That stays on record for 7 years. 7 years, Emily. I can't build my consulting business with that hanging over us. Your parents love you. They'll want to help. We just need to convince them to sell, or better yet, sign the house over to us. We can let them stay here, pay rent if they want. Pay rent? In their own house? It won't be their house anymore, sweetheart. It'll be ours. Come on. Where does your mother keep the important documents? The deed has to be here somewhere. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart hammering. This couldn't be real. My daughter, my Emily, was in my office helping her husband search for property documents. To steal my house. I wanted to burst in there, confront them immediately, but something held me back. Some instinct told me I needed to understand the full scope of what was happening. So I moved quietly up the stairs. Margaret was in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of our bed, staring at nothing. When I opened the door, she jumped like I'd fired a gun. Thomas! Her hand flew to her chest. What are you doing here? I thought you were fishing. Forgot my tackle box. I sat beside her, keeping my voice low. Maggie, what's going on? Why are Emily and Richard here? Her eyes filled with tears. Just filled right up and spilled over. In 43 years of marriage, I could count on one hand the number of times I'd seen my wife cry. Oh, Thomas. Her voice broke. I didn't want to ruin your trip. Emily came by yesterday, said they're in trouble. Serious financial trouble. Richard's business failed, and they owe money. A lot of money. Over $300,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. 300,000? She asked if we could help. I told her we have our retirement savings, but that's for us, for emergencies, for care if we need it someday. She understood. Or I thought she did. Then she asked about the house. Margaret's hands twisted in her lap. She asked how much equity we have, if we'd ever considered downsizing, selling. I told her no, that this is our home. We're not going anywhere. When did Richard show up? This morning. Early. He said they needed to talk to both of us, but since you were gone, could he and Emily come in to discuss some options? I made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table, and Thomas, the way he talked, he made it sound so reasonable. Said they weren't asking us to leave, just to put the house in Emily's name as a safety net. Said creditors were coming after them, that they might lose everything, and if we loved Emily, we'd protect her. That's manipulation, Maggie. I know. She grabbed my hand. I told them no. I said we built this house. This is where we'll stay until we can't anymore, and when that day comes, the house goes to Emily anyway. Richard's face changed. Got hard? He said I was being selfish, that Emily's mother should want to help her own daughter. Emily just sat there, looking at the floor. She didn't defend me. She didn't say a word. Downstairs, I heard a drawer slam. Richard's voice, frustrated. It's not in the file cabinet. Check the safe. I don't know the combination, Emily said. Then get it from your mother. My wife's grip tightened on my hand. Thomas, I'm afraid. I've never seen Emily like this. She's not herself. Richard has some kind of hold on her. I stood up, my mind racing. Where's your phone? Downstairs in my purse. Why? I'm going to record this. Whatever happens next, I want documentation. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice memo app, and hit record. Then I slipped it into my shirt pocket, lens facing out. Thomas, what are you going to do? I'm going to protect our home. Stay here. I walked downstairs, my footsteps deliberately heavy on the wooden steps. By the time I reached the bottom, Emily and Richard were emerging from my office, both trying to look casual. Dad! Emily's smile was bright, forced. What are you doing back? I thought you went fishing. Forgot something. I looked from my daughter to my son-in-law. Richard wore khakis and a polo shirt, his hair perfectly styled, his smile perfect. Too perfect. What are you two doing here so early? Just visiting Mom, Emily said quickly. Too quickly. In my office? The smile faltered. I was looking for a pen. There are pens in the kitchen. There are pens in the living room. Why were you in my office? Looking through my file cabinet. Richard stepped forward, putting himself between Emily and me. Red flag. Thomas, we need to talk. It's about Emily's situation. Our situation. She's too emotional to explain it properly, so let me be direct. We're in debt. Significant debt. We need help, and your family. That's what families do. They help each other. I'm aware of your debt, Margaret told me. I'm sorry you're struggling, but I don't see how that involves my home office or my file cabinet. We need collateral, Richard said, his voice smooth as glass. A place to regroup. Your house is paid off. You've told us that. You have significant equity. If you transfer the deed to Emily, we can use that equity to pay off our creditors, and you two can continue living here. Nothing changes for you. You just sign some papers. I let the silence stretch. Let him feel it. Then I said, very quietly, "Get out of my house." Richard blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Get out." "Dad," Emily's voice rose. "Dad, please, just listen. We're desperate." Richard's business collapsed, and these people we owe money to, they're not nice people. They're threatening us. We need help. Then go to the police. File bankruptcy. Seek financial counseling. But you don't come into my home, go through my private documents, and try to manipulate my wife while I'm away. That's not asking for help. That's attempted theft. Richard's mask slipped. His eyes went cold. Theft? That's your daughter you're talking about. Your only child. What kind of father refuses to help his own kid? The kind who recognizes a con when he sees one. I don't know what kind of business you had, Richard, but I know people don't rack up $300,000 in legitimate business debt without some serious mismanagement or worse. I think there's more to this story. You don't know anything, Richard snapped. I know you're in my house without permission, going through my things, trying to coerce my wife into signing away her home. I know my daughter is standing here letting it happen, and I know I want you out. Now, Emily started crying. Real tears this time, not manipulation. Daddy, please. I don't know what else to do. Richard says, if we don't pay these people back by the end of the month, something bad will happen. What people, Emily? Who do you owe? She looked at Richard, He shook his head slightly, warning her. That's when I knew this was worse than I thought. "Emily," I said gently. "Sweetheart, look at me. Not him. Me." She did, tears streaming down her face. "Who do you owe money to?" "I don't know their names. Richard handles the finances." "How did you accumulate $300,000 in debt?" "The business. Richard's consulting firm. He needed startup capital, investors. It didn't work out." "What kind of consulting?" "Financial consulting," Richard said flatly. "A financial consultant who couldn't manage his own finances." "Right. I want to see documentation," I said. "Business registration, loan agreements, creditor communications. If you're legitimately in trouble, there will be paper trails. Bring me those documents, and we'll talk about what help we can realistically provide. But you're not getting my house." Richard's jaw clenched. "This is unbelievable. You're really going to let your daughter suffer because you're too paranoid to help family?" "I'm going to protect my wife and my assets until I understand what's really happening. That's not paranoia. That's common sense." I pulled out my phone, the one that had been recording this entire conversation. "And I think it's interesting that you haven't once offered any actual proof of this debt. No paperwork, no creditor names, just vague threats and pressure tactics." His eyes fixed on my phone. "Are you recording this?" "I am. Started the moment I heard you in my office telling my daughter to help you steal my property deed." Emily gasped. "Dad, no, it's not like that." "It's exactly like that, sweetheart. And I'm sorry, but you need to hear this. This man," I pointed at Richard, "has manipulated you into committing attempted fraud against your own parents, whether you realize it or not." Richard took a step toward me, aggressive, threatening. "Delete that recording." "No. Delete it or I'll—" "You'll what?" I stood my ground. At 68, I wasn't the fighter I used to be, but I was still 6 feet tall and had worked construction sites for 40 years. "You'll assault me in my own home while I'm recording? Go ahead. Make this easier for the police." "Police?" Emily's voice shot up. "Dad, you can't call the police." "Why not? If what Richard says is true, if you're being threatened by dangerous creditors, the police should know. Unless there's a reason you don't want police involvement." The look Richard shot my daughter was pure venom. In that moment, I saw who he really was. Not a desperate husband trying to save his family. A predator who'd been caught. "We're leaving," Richard said, grabbing Emily's arm. "Take your hands off my daughter. She's my wife. She's my child. And you'll treat her with respect in my home, or I'll make you regret it." I stepped forward. "Emily, you don't have to go with him. You can stay here. We'll figure this out together." She looked at me, and for a moment, I saw my little girl. The one who used to climb into my lap when she was scared, who trusted me to fix everything. But then she looked at Richard, and the spell broke. "I'm sorry, Dad. I have to go." She walked toward the door. "Emily, please." She didn't look back. After they left, I stood in the silence of my hallway, my heart breaking. Then I went upstairs to my wife. Margaret was exactly where I'd left her, sitting on the edge of our bed. "What happened?" I told her everything. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "She's in trouble," Margaret finally said. "Real trouble, not just financial. Thomas, I don't think this is about money at all. I think Richard is dangerous. I think you're right. What do we do?" I looked at my phone, at the voice memo that had captured everything. We document everything. We protect ourselves. And we figure out who Richard Crawford really is. That afternoon, I sat at my computer and started digging. It's amazing what you can find online if you know where to look. I started with basics: public records, court documents, business registrations. Richard Crawford had registered 3 business entities in the last 5 years. All LLCs. All dissolved. Financial Solutions Group, Crawford Capital Advisors, Pinnacle Wealth Management. Every single one had lasted less than a year before being shut down. I dug deeper, found court records, civil cases. Richard Crawford had been sued 4 times in the last 6 years. Different plaintiffs, but the same pattern. He'd convinced people to invest money in his guaranteed return strategies. The money disappeared. The returns never materialized. One case stood out. A couple in their 70s had given Richard their retirement savings, $200,000, for what he'd promised was a secure investment opportunity. They lost everything. The case was settled out of court, but the details in the initial complaint made my blood boil. Richard had befriended them, earned their trust, convinced them their money would be safe with him. Then he'd vanished their savings into offshore accounts they couldn't trace. This wasn't a man with business troubles. This was a con artist, a predator who targeted vulnerable people and stole their life savings. And my daughter had married him. I called Frank, my fishing buddy. He'd worked as an investigator for the DA's office before retiring. If anyone could help me, it was Frank. "Tommy, what's wrong?" he answered on the first ring. I told him everything. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. "This guy's a pro. You said his business was called Financial Solutions Group?" "Among others." "I remember that name. There was a federal investigation 3 years ago. Securities fraud. Guy was running a Ponzi scheme, small scale. He settled with the SEC, paid a fine, avoided criminal charges. Had to promise he wouldn't operate as a financial advisor anymore. And he's still doing it. Apparently. Under different company names. That's illegal, Tommy. If he's violating the terms of his settlement, the FBI will be very interested." "The FBI? Securities fraud crosses state lines. That makes it federal. You've got that recording?" "I do." "Good. Make copies. Multiple copies. Store them in different places. Then we're going to make some calls." By evening, I had copies of the recording on 3 different devices, plus a cloud backup. I'd printed out everything I'd found about Richard's business history. Margaret and I sat at the kitchen table, going through it all. "Our daughter married a criminal," Margaret said quietly. "She didn't know. She couldn't have known. But she knows now," we told her, "and she left with him anyway." That was the part that hurt the most. Emily had chosen to leave with Richard, even after seeing his true colors, even after knowing what he'd tried to do to us. "She's scared," I said. "He's manipulated her for 5 years, isolated her from us. Remember how the visits became less frequent after they married? How she always had an excuse not to come to dinner? That wasn't her. That was him, controlling her, keeping her away from anyone who might see through him." Margaret's eyes filled with tears again. "We have to save her. We will. But first we have to stop him from destroying more lives." The next morning, Frank arrived with someone I didn't expect. FBI Special Agent Linda Morrison, mid-40s, sharp eyes, all business. "Mr. Brennan," she said, shaking my hand. Frank filled me in. "I'd like to hear the recording." We sat in my living room, and I played it. All of it. The conversation in my office, the confrontation in the hallway, Richard's threats, Emily's tears. Agent Morrison listened without expression, taking notes. When it ended, she looked up. "Mr. Brennan, I need to tell you something. We've been building a case against Richard Crawford for 8 months. He's been running an elaborate investment fraud scheme, targeting retirees and older couples. He finds people with significant assets, befriends them, gains their trust, then convinces them to invest in what he calls guaranteed return portfolios. The money goes into offshore accounts. The victims never see it again." My stomach dropped. "How many victims?" "That we know of? 14. Total losses around $2.3 million. Jesus. Your daughter filed a joint tax return with him last year. Legally, that makes her potentially liable as well. We don't believe she's actively involved in the fraud, but we need to prove that. This recording helps. It shows she's under his influence, possibly being coerced." "You're not going to arrest her?" Margaret's voice shook. "Not if she cooperates with our investigation. But we need her to testify against him, and we need to move fast. Our intelligence suggests Richard is planning to flee the country in the next 2 weeks." "With Emily?" I asked. "We don't know. Maybe, or he might leave her behind to face the consequences while he disappears with whatever money he's already moved overseas." Margaret grabbed my hand. Agent Morrison continued, "The debt he told you about, the $300,000? That's not debt he owes. That's money he stole from his most recent victim, an elderly widow in Reno. He needs more. He's getting desperate, which is why he targeted you. Your home equity would have been his exit fund." "How do we get Emily away from him?" I asked. That's complicated. She's an adult. She chose to stay with him. We can't force her to leave. But Agent Morrison leaned forward. If you're willing to help us, we might be able to create a situation where she sees the truth, where she understands the danger she's in and chooses to save herself. Whatever you need, I said. We'll do it. The plan was simple but risky. Agent Morrison wanted me to call Emily, tell her I'd reconsidered, that Margaret and I had talked it over, and we were willing to help. We'd invite them to dinner to discuss the details. During dinner, agents would be positioned around the house, recording everything. The goal was to get Richard talking, to get him to incriminate himself on tape while trying to manipulate us into signing documents. He'll be suspicious, I said. He knows I saw through him. Tell him you did research, found out about his business troubles, and you understand now that he's a victim of circumstances. Appeal to his ego. Men like Richard believe they're smarter than everyone else. If you convince him you've come around to his way of thinking, he'll let his guard down. Margaret shook her head. I don't know if I can do this. Sit across the table from him. Pretend everything's fine, knowing what he is. You can, Agent Morrison said gently, because it's the only way to save Emily and to stop him from destroying other families. That afternoon, I called my daughter. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice cautious. Dad? Emily, honey. We need to talk. Your mother and I have been thinking about what you said, about your situation. Silence. We may have been too hasty yesterday, too quick to judge. Richard's right. You're our daughter. If you need help, we should at least hear you out properly. Can you and Richard come to dinner tomorrow night? We can discuss this like adults, figure out what's possible. More silence. Then, you mean it? I mean it, sweetheart. I did some research on Richard's businesses. I can see how things could have gone wrong through no fault of his own. The economy, timing, bad luck. It happens. Let's talk. Hold on. Muffled conversation. Richard's voice in the background, questioning. Then Emily came back on. Richard says yes. Tomorrow at 6? 6 is perfect. I'll have your mother make pot roast. Your favorite. Thank you, Daddy. I knew you'd come around. I knew you loved me more than some house. The guilt in my chest was crushing, but I kept my voice steady. We do love you, sweetheart, more than you know. See you tomorrow. After I hung up, Margaret looked at me. I felt sick listening to that, using her trust against her. We're not using her trust. We're saving her life. That night, neither of us slept much. The next day crawled by. Agent Morrison and her team arrived at 4 o'clock, dressed as cable repair workers. They placed recording devices in the dining room, living room, and kitchen. Tiny cameras in the light fixtures, microphones in the vents. By 5:30, our home was wired like a surveillance operation. We'll be outside, Agent Morrison said. 3 agents in the van across the street. 2 more in the house behind yours. If anything goes wrong, if you feel unsafe at any point, just say the word, remarkable. That's the abort signal. We'll be inside in seconds. At 5:45, Margaret and I stood in the kitchen, staring at each other. We can do this, I said. We have to, she replied. At 6:02, the doorbell rang. Emily looked tired. Dark circles under her eyes, her smile strained. Richard looked confident. Too confident. He shook my hand firmly, clapped me on the shoulder like we were old friends. Thomas, I appreciate this. I really do. Shows character, admitting when you've judged too quickly. I wanted to break his nose. Instead, I smiled. We all make mistakes. Come in, please. Dinner's almost ready. We sat in the dining room, the same table where Margaret and I had shared thousands of meals over 4 decades. Richard sat across from me, Emily beside him. Margaret served pot roast, potatoes, green beans. Normal, except nothing was normal. So, Richard said, cutting into his meat, I assume you want to see the numbers, the debt breakdown, the creditor information. That would help, I said. I like to understand situations before making decisions. He pulled a folder from his briefcase, smooth, practiced. Inside were documents, spreadsheets, loan agreements. All fake, I knew, but professionally done. Richard had clearly done this before. As you can see, he explained, pointing to various numbers. The majority of the debt comes from startup costs for my consulting firm. Equipment, software, office space, marketing. I projected the business would be profitable within 2 years. What I didn't anticipate was how difficult it would be to attract clients in this economy. People are risk-averse right now. They're not investing in new consultants. What kind of consulting exactly? I asked, playing dumb. Financial planning. Investment strategies. I help clients maximize returns while minimizing risk. And you have credentials for this? A flash of annoyance crossed his face. I worked in finance for 15 years before starting my own firm. I know the industry inside and out. But no formal certifications? Series 7 license, CFP designation? Those are just bureaucratic hurdles. Real expertise comes from experience. Red flag after red flag. But I nodded along. I see. And these creditors, they're legitimate lending institutions? Private lenders. They offer better rates than banks, but they're less flexible with payment schedules. That's where we're running into trouble. How much do you need? Total. Richard leaned forward. To clear everything and restart with a clean slate? $350,000. More than the amount he'd told Emily. Of course. And your plan would be to use our home equity to secure a loan? Exactly. You'd transfer the deed to Emily. She and I would take out a home equity line of credit, pay off the creditors, and then we'd make the payments on the HELOC. You wouldn't have to do anything except sign the initial transfer paperwork. And we'd continue living here? Absolutely. For as long as you want. This is your home. Lies. All lies. I could see the whole scheme. Once they had the deed, Richard would take out the maximum loan amount against the property, drain every penny of equity, then default. The bank would foreclose. Margaret and I would be evicted from our own home, while Richard disappeared with the money. I glanced at Emily. She was staring at her plate, pushing food around. Not eating, not speaking, just sitting there like a puppet. Emily, sweetheart, I said gently. What do you think about all this? She looked up, startled. Me? Yes, you. This is a big decision. How do you feel about putting our house at risk? Her eyes darted to Richard. He gave her a look, encouraging but with an edge. A warning, I think. She started, then stopped. Tried again. I think it's our only option. If we don't do this, Richard says, the consequences will be severe. What consequences specifically? Richard cut in. These lenders I mentioned, they're not patient people. They've made it clear that if we don't pay by the end of next week, they'll take legal action. Seizure of assets, wage garnishment. It could ruin Emily's credit for years. But Emily doesn't work, Margaret said quietly. It was the first thing she'd said since sitting down. Richard's smile tightened. She's listed as a partner in my business, legally liable for business debts. Convenient, I said. Excuse me? I said that's convenient. That your wife is legally liable for your business failures. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Dad, Emily said nervously, you said you wanted to help. I do want to help, honey. But I need to understand the full picture. Richard, these private lenders, do they have names? Official business licenses? Why does that matter? Because legitimate lenders have paper trails, corporate registrations. If you're being threatened, we should report them to the authorities. It's not that simple, isn't it? If someone's threatening you, that's illegal. Unless... I paused, let the implication hang. Unless these aren't legitimate debts at all. Richard stood up. I don't appreciate what you're implying. Sit down, Richard. We're not finished. Yes, we are. Emily, get your coat. We're leaving. No, I said. You're not. You can't stop me. Actually, I can. Because there are 3 FBI agents in a van across the street, and 2 more in the house behind us. They've been recording this entire conversation. And Richard Crawford, you're under arrest for wire fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft. The front door burst open. Agent Morrison entered first, followed by 4 other agents in full tactical gear. Richard tried to run, made it 2 steps before an agent tackled him to the ground. Emily screamed. Emily, It's okay. I stood up, trying to reach her. Sweetheart, you're not in trouble. We're protecting you. She backed against the wall, her eyes wild. What's happening? Dad, what did you do? Richard's a criminal, honey. He's been running scams, stealing from people. We couldn't let him do it to us, and we couldn't let him ruin your life. Agent Morrison approached Emily carefully, hands visible, non-threatening. Emily Crawford, I'm Special Agent Linda Morrison, FBI. You're not under arrest, but I need you to come with me so we can talk. You're potentially a witness in a federal investigation. Witness? Investigation? I don't understand. Emily was sobbing now. Full breakdown. Richard was face down on our dining room floor, hands cuffed behind his back. He twisted his head to look at Emily. Don't say anything. Don't tell them anything. Call my lawyer. Your lawyer is already in custody, Agent Morrison said. He was part of your operation. Now, shut up. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. They pulled Richard to his feet, read him his full Miranda rights, and took him out to a waiting vehicle. Through the window, I watched them load him into the back seat. Our neighbors were gathering on their lawns, watching the scene unfold. Emily collapsed into a chair, her whole body shaking. Margaret moved to her side immediately, pulling our daughter into her arms. It's okay, baby. It's over. You're safe now. Mom, I don't understand. Why is the FBI here? What did Richard do? A lot of things, I said quietly. Very bad things. He's been stealing from people, honey, running investment scams. And he was going to steal from us, too. Use our house to fund his escape from the country. No, that's not true. Richard loves me. He wouldn't. Emily, look at me. I knelt down in front of her. Has Richard ever hit you? She hesitated. Too long. Emily? Just once. When I said I didn't want to ask you and Mom for money. He grabbed my arm. Hard, left bruises. But he apologized. He said he was just stressed, that it wouldn't happen again. Margaret made a sound like she'd been punched. Has he controlled your money? I continued. Your bank accounts? Your credit cards? He handles the finances. He's better at that stuff than I am. When was the last time you saw your own bank statement? She couldn't answer. When was the last time you spent money without asking him first? Still nothing. When was the last time you saw your friends without him? Came to visit us without him? Emily's face crumbled. Oh my God. Oh my God. What did I do? How did I not see it? Because he's a professional, Agent Morrison said, sitting down across from us. He manipulates people for a living. It's what he does, and he's good at it. You're not the first person he's fooled, and unfortunately, you wouldn't have been the last. But thanks to your parents, we've got him, and now we need your help to make sure he stays in prison for a very long time. Emily looked at me, at Margaret, at the dining room where we'd spent so many happy family dinners, and she nodded. Tell me what you need. The next 3 weeks were a blur. Emily moved back in with us. She gave her statement to the FBI, detailing everything she knew about Richard's activities. It wasn't much. He'd kept her carefully isolated from his actual business, but she knew enough. Names of people he'd met with, conversations she'd overheard, bank accounts she'd seen statements from. The federal prosecutors built an airtight case. Richard Crawford was charged with 14 counts of wire fraud, 8 counts of securities fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, and violation of his previous SEC settlement terms. His assets were frozen. The FBI traced money to accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Panama. Over $1.8 million recovered. Not all of it, but enough to compensate most of his victims. Emily filed for divorce. Richard didn't contest it. He was too busy trying to save himself from spending the rest of his life in federal prison. The trial lasted 3 days. Margaret and I sat in the courtroom, watching prosecutors dismantle Richard's lies one by one. Emily testified. She was brave, honest. When Richard's lawyer tried to imply she'd been complicit, she looked him in the eye and said, I was a victim too. He stole 5 years of my life, isolated me from my family, and used me as cover for his crimes. But I'm not a victim anymore. I'm a witness. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. guilty on all counts. Richard Crawford was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole. 6 months later, Margaret and I sat on our back porch, watching the sunset. Emily was inside, making dinner. She'd moved into her old room, said she needed time to heal before she was ready to live on her own again. We were in no hurry for her to leave. "I still can't believe it happened," Margaret said, her hand in mine. "Neither can I, but it's over now." "Do you think she'll be okay? Really okay?" "Eventually. She's strong, like her mother." Emily came out onto the porch, carrying 3 glasses of iced tea. She handed us each one, then sat down in the chair between us. "Dinner's in 30 minutes. Pot roast." "Your favorite," I said. "No, Dad. Your favorite. But I'm learning to cook it the way you like it." We sat there in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from orange to pink to purple. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A car drove past. Normal sounds, normal life. Emily spoke quietly. "I never thanked you properly. For saving me. For not giving up even when I chose him over you." "You're our daughter," Margaret said. "We'd never give up on you. I know that now. I'm sorry it took almost losing everything for me to remember it." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "You didn't lose everything. You lost a con artist who never deserved you in the first place. But you found your way back to us. That's what matters. I'm going to pay you back. For the lawyer fees, No, I interrupted. You're going to heal. You're going to rebuild your life. You're going to remember who you were before Richard. And when you're ready, you're going to find someone who deserves you. Someone who sees how remarkable you are." She smiled at that, a real smile. The first one I'd seen in months. We stayed on that porch until full dark, 3 generations of Brennans, bound together by something stronger than any con artist could break. Family, the real kind. The kind that fights for you even when you've forgotten how to fight for yourself. And if I learned anything from that nightmare, it's this. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is. Document everything. Protect the people you love, even when they don't realize they need protecting. And never, ever underestimate the power of a father's love for his daughter. Richard Crawford thought he was smarter than everyone else. He thought he could manipulate us, steal from us, destroy us. But he forgot one crucial thing. You don't threaten a man's family and expect to walk away. In the end, justice wasn't remarkable. It was inevitable.